Hi, and welcome to PGS Reviews. I'm your host, Rrr Mmmm. PGS Reviews is the show we created so that PGS viewers can come on and talk about things that they love that stir the imagination. Today we're going to be doing a review, a spoiler version review, of Underworld from 2003. And I'm joined today with Russ Whitfield. Hello, Russ.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for joining us today.
It's only a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So, Underworld. This film was directed by Len Wiseman. And incidentally, he is known for directing this particular movie as well as many other versions of Underworld in the series. And the film stars Kate Beckinsale, Scott Seidman, Bill Nighy, and Michael Sheen. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, just even kind of starting out talking about Underworld, I think that what they did with this film is that, and what's really interesting is that Wiseman co-created the Underworld series. Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, it really is, I think, in my opinion, you know, when you first start to talk about this film and try to understand what it's like, you know, it is a film that involves a classic battle between two legendary sorts of creatures. But it doesn't just stop there. Wiseman decided to create a world that has a certain look to it. And I think that the look that he created for Underworld is definitely part of its appeal.
Yeah, 100%. The genesis of this film was himself, Kevin Griveau, who appears in the film as the werewolf Rays, and the writer Danny McBride. But there was some controversy around this film before its release, because in the mid-90s there was a tabletop role-playing game called Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse. And that was published by a company called White Wolf. And White Wolf took, I think it was New Line that did Underworld to court, because they were trying to claim that the idea of the vampire clans fighting the werewolves and all that kind of thing was very, very similar to their concept for the games that they had, and it was actually settled out of court. That's the White Wolf version. I think New Line just threw money at it because the film was coming out and they didn't want that controversy, so they did a Pontius Pilate and just washed their hands of it. Here's some money and don't bother us. According to Kevin, Len, and Danny, they came up with it, the three of them, you know, like it was just an idea that they really wanted to explore. So Kevin Griveau, the werewolf guy, I don't know if you watch the film, he's got that really sort of deep gravelly voice. It's not a special effect. He actually sounds like that, which I find is insane. So he's got a background in genetics, like he studied this at college. So his concept for it was really to try and base all of this in science to a greater or lesser degree. I mean, you're still dealing with vampires and werewolves, which they hated having to write in the script. Apparently they didn't want to use the word werewolf, especially because it gives visions of something cheesy. And they were, to talk about the aesthetic, they were definitely wanting to take this as seriously as possible. So when they looked and looked, they traveled far and wide actually, and I think it was shot in Budapest eventually, because Wiseman turned around and said, look, you know, of all the places he looked at, Budapest was really the sort of the most gothic place he could find. Some of the locations they went to there were really rough, but they got the aesthetic that they were after. And he said that he really wanted this to be a world where, you know, nobody went shopping. There aren't any 7-Elevens. Nobody fills up their car with gas. You know, it really is. His vision was to have it as a graphic novel come to life. So if you view the film through that lens, then I think it just it really helps the viewing experience when you realize what he was actually, I mean, you know, it's fairly obvious what he was going for, but he came out and categorically said, "Yeah, this is a comic book, a moving comic book." So I love the way that the whole film was shot using those, the desaturated and bluish tinge that they've got to the whole thing, and just the whole design of the movie is insane. If you look at the imagery that they use, a lot of it's Celtic, a lot of it's Romano-Christian. The production designer was really into this idea that these vampires are obviously very, very old. They've been around for a long, long time. So elements of everything they've seen throughout their lives is going to go into their contemporary look and feel. So there was a lot of thought, I think, put into the production of this. The leather coats, the trench coats, and the leather outfits aside, I think that was very much a sign of the times. We had Blade come out, I think, in '98, and Matrix was '99 or 2000, and this was the most Matrixy of the films to come out thereafter. But I don't really think you can call it a Matrix ripoff. There was certainly no bullet time or anything like that in this movie. It just, the vampire werewolf aesthetic just seems to work really well with that leather coat look, I feel.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, you talked about the idea of them desiring to make an adaptation, let's say, of a graphic novel or something on that order. And oftentimes we see adaptations like that happen, and they don't come off as nearly as good as this adaptation, which is truly standalone in its execution. They maintain this feature, the unique sense of tone and the unique sense of immersion throughout the film. So regardless of which scene you're at or where you're going, or even time of day, how do you even recreate a day scene, so that it still feels like it's part of that world? And they've done it here. So everything was so well thought out. And I think for those of you who love cinematography, I think this particular film is quite an achievement, because they created this world, and it's almost fantastical as the beings themselves. It's almost as if the beings are existing in this world, and the humans who coexist are not part of the world. And let's say the lichens and the vampires are kind of, as the film starts out, we have the shot of the main character looking down on normal scenes of humans going about their daily lives. But that also gives you a sense of the sort of almost ethereal feel of the lichens and the vampires compared to the humans, like as they're looking down on the humans going around their day-to-day lives, and there is no interaction, let's say, in this particular film, or they appear to be observing, but it's clear that they're part of a different realm than what lies below on the streets.
Absolutely. But I mean, what an opening shot. The way that, the camera comes in from the back, and you've got Kate Beckinsale's, coat flying in the wind, and then, her hand and the rain dripping, and she looks over at the other guy. And I think just even at that incidental character, and he lasts about, 2 minutes of screen time, but he looks otherworldly. He's got that real Eastern European, high cheekbone, hawk nose look, and they look other. I mean, look at Kate Beckinsale; she's otherworldly beautiful anyway. But all of them have this ethereal look, as you say, that makes them look as though they're not really supposed to be where they are. And the whole premise of that opening scene there is, okay, so there's this big fight in the train station, which they recreated. It was actually a siding. It wasn't a railway station at all. It was a sort of railway station graveyard where they reshot that, where they recreated that entire scene. And after Kate Beckinsale's had a opening fight, she goes back to her coven, and the first thing she said is, they were doing this in broad daylight, in front of people with no attempt to hide. So you get this backup from what she says in her opening monologue about the war dragging on for centuries, and under and people don't know what's happening until now. And literally, it is until that moment nobody really sees what's happening, and the vampires are desperately trying to keep it under wraps. But Lucian, played by Michael Sheen in this, and that guy Michael Sheen and Nighy, when he eventually comes into the movie, are just chewing scenery in they're immense in this movie. And of course Lucian, as played by Michael Sheen, has got this grand plan, and he wants to end the war, and you find out why as the movie progresses, and who the real heroes are and who the real villains are. But yeah, in terms of an opening action sequence, and don't forget as well, this is 2003, so it's nearly virtually 20 years ago now, and women in action roles, in lead roles like that, were rare. We had, Sarah Connor, you had Ellen Ripley in Aliens, and then Alien 3 and 4, but it was quite rare to have a female action heroine, which a franchise was, or it wasn't a franchise at the time, but a major role for a major female action heroine was something pretty rare. And they took it in all seriousness, and that's what I like about all of the Underworld movies, is that if you read reviews of them, that the people will rip them to shreds, but I really enjoy the fact that they have these high quality actors for the most part, taking this dead seriously, and they're delivering this, I guess it could be hokey dialogue when you're trying to talk about vampires and werewolves and that kind of thing, but they're absolutely committed to it. There's no nodding and winking at the audience, and we know this is a bit silly, because that was, to use a Robert Meyer Burnett word, the verisimilitude of Underworld is paramount. And interestingly, Beckinsale didn't want to read the script, because she saw vampires, werewolves. She thought, oh no, that's not really me. I'm a costume drawer. I don't want to do this at all. But Wiseman is a artist in his own right. He's an amazing sketch artist, comic artist, and all that stuff. And he had drawn a whole load of imagery, sort of concept art around the movie. And she saw that, and she thought, well, that looks cool. And that's then what inspired her to read the script. And once she was on board, that then, obviously I think she was with Michael Sheen at the time, or perhaps, I think they were together at that time, and that got him on board. And then Nighy comes on board, and all of a sudden you've got these British thespians on board on this vampire movie, and it lent the whole thing weight. I just felt that the performances in that film were brilliant, and Beckinsale was committed to it. I mean, one of the things that she spoke about, and Len Wiseman talks about a lot, is when she's shooting, if you watch her when she's shooting, she doesn't blink. She practice not to blink because it's a natural reaction when you're shooting the gun. But even in the incidental scenes, like there's one I remember when she puts Speedman in a safe house, and of course the Lycans find them, and she's firing away with these guns, doesn't blink at all. It's these little tiny details. They really went to town on the to use the word aesthetic, and these small details, which, to call back to what you were saying, gives it that otherworldly feeling, even if you're not consciously aware of it. All these little things that they're doing, the imagery and the not blinking, makes you believe that these creatures are not real.
So they are vampires, and they are in search of the Lycans, which are the werewolves. And they explain, the main character Celine explains, but not overly explains, like it's absolutely perfect, the amount of background information you're given from the beginning, is that there was this war between the two, which falls into traditional lore. We all know that vampires and werewolves are enemies, so to speak. And then we find out even more, as seems like the vampires have the upper hand and are trying to get rid of the last werewolves. But there seems to be some kind of issue. It's a war that has spanned 6 centuries. And you just get this idea of the gravity of how long this war has been going on, which is another element that I think adds so much more legitimacy to the story is just how long they've been fighting one another, and how determined the vampires are to kind of eradicate the lichens.
Mm.
And then we're kind of thrown a curveball that, even despite the fact that these vampires seem to, or the Celine feels that she's going to be obsolete because they've almost destroyed every lichen. We're thrown a curveball when she mentions that over the years the lichens have learned to fight back,
Mm.
and that they, whenever the moon is full, they don't have to turn back to, they can stay in a human form versus becoming a werewolf. And that's an advantage because it allows them to sort of blend in and
Well, that's
hide in
right.
ways.
Well, this all stems from, again, they thought long and hard about their own lore, and in some ways, I really hope there was a TV series of this to really go into the actual background of it. But the reason being that there were, so that all comes down to the sort of the Corvinus line, and there was this mysterious plague because Kevin Grevioux wanted it to be based in science. So there's a plague, and Alexander Corvinus is immune to it, and then his sons are immune to it, and they become immortal because of this virus and all the rest of it. One of them gets, coincidentally, and this is where it gets a little bit tenuous. One's bitten by a bat, one's bitten by a wolf, and then one becomes a vampire, one becomes a werewolf. Which in the first movie, which they then go on to contradict thereafter. Victor, Bill Nighy's character, you know, they capture a werewolf, and he says one bitten by bat and one bitten by wolf, and Nighy scoffs. He goes, "Oh, that's just a fairy tale." But then they sort of double back on that. The point being that uh, Lucian's mum is pregnant with him, and she gets bitten. So he's the first kind of hybrid, if you like, sort of half human, half werewolf, and he's the one that's got control over when he transforms and when he doesn't. Whereas the initial lichens or initial werewolves are not lichens; they're werewolves. They're just mad beasts. So once you get bitten, you just become a wolf, and you can never change back. And it's Lucian that, as you find out why they're fighting the war later on, but he's like the first one and the most powerful one.
And
And
as you,
sorry,
um,
yeah.
and as you said, Underworld actually starts with a fight after
Mhm.
that first scene underground.
Yeah.
And that also is kind of interesting because we've all been, or many of us have been in subways, and we can relate to a subway shot. But what's not entirely apparent in the first scene is, other than the fact that Celine and her other vampire, um, uh,
The Death Dealer.
the death dealers are trying to go after the lichens. Turns out that there's a little bit more to the scene than meets the eye.
Yes, absolutely. And you find out a little bit later on. So Celine returns to the coven, and then you find out a little bit more about the hierarchy of the vampires and how they live. And again, we can look back on this now and say, oh, it's pretty typical, and we know that vampires don't like werewolves and vice versa. But that was never really a thing up until that role-playing game, and then this film brought it into the mainstream. When you look at how the vampires are, they're pretty goth. It's just really, they're all there drinking their blood, and they've all got the goth dresses on and the leathers and the lace and all that kind of thing. And you look at the lichens, and they're all really grunge. They're really kind of not even heavy metal. They're really grunge, like late 90s grunge kind of thing. And that was really cool. But yeah, you go back and you find that that there are three main immortals. There's Victor, Marcus, and oh goodness me, I can't remember the third immortal's name now. But she's currently awake, and only one
Is it
elder.
Amelia?
Amelia, correct? Yes, thank you. She's awake, and then she's been awake for 100 years, and then the next one will come for 100 years, and so on and so on. But they're all divided into these covens or clans, and at the moment we have the guy called Craven. His name's a bit of a giveaway. He's the current regent. He's overseeing. He's the master of this particular clan, and it transpires that the reason why he has gained such a high position in the vampire hierarchy is because he was the one that killed Lucian, many years ago, and cut off his slave brand off his arm, and that's like becomes part of the law. But of course, as it transpires later on, not everything is as it seems.
That's right. And so in that subway scene, we find that Celine continues with, I think Rigel is one of her, one of the men that she's with who is hunting down these lichens.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something unusual that happens in the sense of they, obviously the director wanted you to notice that when Celine goes down into the subway following the lichens, she makes eye contact with someone. And
Yes.
And it's sort of like, I wouldn't call it a come hither look, but it's kind of like, are you checking me out? Yeah, I'm checking you out. Kind of look that, you can't deny you're looking at this person. And she looks at him and he looks at her. And I think she pulls back a little bit. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Like I shouldn't have looked at him like that. But she has some sort of attraction to him and he has some kind of attraction to her.
And this is unsaid, but if you think about it, she is attracted to him, and that's obvious from that look. But why? Because he's a human, and they don't even notice normal people. People are cattle as far as they're concerned. But there's something about Michael that is not normal and catches her attention amongst all those people. So when then she goes back to the coven, she realizes. She's replaying the footage that they, of course, can get hold of because vampires are in the wainscoting of society, can get hold of everything. And she then realizes that they were not out hunting vampires; they were hunting that guy.
Right.
And now the
lichens were chasing him. Yes.
Yeah. Why are they after this particular guy? And Craven, the boss, is all like, well, don't worry about that. He's really anti her looking into this any further, which of course makes her then want to look into it more and more. Just as an aside, one of the other vampires is played by a British actress called Sophia Myles, and again, she's not given a lot to do, but what she does with what she's got, the acting, they just smashed it. They just smashed it. Apart from the one guy that did get a little bit of criticism for not being good was Shane Brolly, the guy that played Craven, and I don't think he was that bad. I just think when you've got Sophia Myles, Bill Nighy, and Kate Beckinsale acting around you all in a scene together, he was going to struggle. I think it was a shame because they didn't bring him back. He was supposed to be in the second one, but he copped too much online heat, and they didn't bring him back in the role that he was supposed to be in part two.
Well, it's interesting because Celine then finds herself sort of in a shootout, and as we mentioned, she's pursuing these lichens, but the lichens are pursuing Michael, who's this human, and so it's kind of a round and round chase of bullets and brawn and jumping through, the subway and jumping into cars and. While Celine is down there, she notices that there are specific bullets or rounds that are used against her and Rigel. And she also notices Michael, as we mentioned. And then at some point, she retreats and she grabs this camera, I guess, that Rigel had of stuff that they were observing of the lichens that were there. And as you mentioned already, Celine returns back to the compound, the vampire compound, and this vampire compound is a very safe place because they're protected. That's where the vault, where the leaders who are in sort of like a hibernation state are at, and it's a safe environment. And Celine is kind of a bit of a rebel in this whole thing. I mean, she doesn't appear to be one, but you soon kind of find out that she thinks a little bit outside of the box, and that sometimes doing that, makes all or many of the people who are in charge in her clan very upset with her.
Yeah, I think she has pretty much replaced or taken the place of Victor's daughter, who you find out what happens to her later on. And she's the favored child, and therefore feels that she can she can rail against Craven's authority, and of course Craven is attracted to this, and all he wants is Celine to be his partner, so to speak. But it's Sophia Miles's character that's actually infatuated with Craven, and all she wants to do is get hold of Craven, and Kate Beckinsale is not interested in Craven in the slightest.
Right.
And it's almost this situation where Craven's trying to exert his hierarchical power over Beckinsale the entire time, or Celine the entire time, and she's not having any of it. She won't put up with it, because she's one of the death dealers, the leader of the death dealers in fact, and she's not going to take it. And I think the death dealers, or certainly the death dealers as represented by Celine, look down on the rest of them as being a little bit decadent, a little bit soft, and all the rest of it. Whereas they very much are the warrior clan, and they're in this position of having to, or she's certainly in a position of having to protect people and fight a war for people that she believes are decadent and soft.
Absolutely. And ironically, while she has this encounter with the Lycans and with Michael, she discovers that there's sort of, I guess you would call it a lair, where there seem to be several Lycans present. And she, discovers this and immediately reports back, telling Craven, along with other of the clan, that there's quite a few more Lycans than we anticipated. And not only that, they seem to have this brand new UV rounds,
yes,
to use against the vampires. And this is kind of a serious situation. It's probably not one or two people who decided to come up with something that could really hurt the vampires during a fight, and they just don't believe her.
Yeah. Well, she doesn't. She actually takes one of the clips, I think, and gives it to her death dealer weapons guy. But that they set that up right in the opening dialogue. She actually says, in her voiceover at the beginning, the weapons have changed, but the war remains the same, I think is the line. But that foreshadowing is that it pays off almost straight away when you see that the Lycans are actually on the fight back. They've got this stuff, and they're going to use it.
Yes, they certainly are. And so we can actually see, they go back to that scene where you can see the Lycans are in the lair, and there is Lucien, who's, let's say, currently the leaders of the Lycans. And he makes it very clear, everybody, please get ready and be prepared. Tonight's the night, or we're going to get ready to rumble soon. I need you guys prepared, and stop joking around. They're kind of having sort of blood sport competition, just to kind of loosen up and clear the atmosphere. But Lucien is like, no, it's time. So I want everybody ready.
But that's like his entrance, and he comes in with his long hair and his beard, and he's like, "You're acting like a pack of rabid dogs." And it's such a silly line, but of course, Michael Sheen's like all in on it. He like sells that line so well, and they're all like, "Oh, okay."
He has a tradition of playing roles like this as being a leader, and he's very effective, and he's almost charming in a way that Craven is not. So
there's a reason for that.
Yes,
there's a reason for
that.
Is.
And so he's automatically likable, but he's supposed to be the bad guy. But
yes, he is.
But you can't help but kind of be a little mesmerized by his charm. And so Celine, after explaining how she's found this lair and there are all these weapons, why aren't these guys believing me, she's so frustrated. She decides to do something very drastic.
Yeah, well, this plays back into her role as favorite daughter. So she believes that Craven is ineffective and weak, and why is he so anti this? There's something not quite right, because the point of the war is to wipe these guys out, and now we're hesitating. Why are we hesitating? So she then opts to break the law and wake Victor, who she believes will side with her. But the point of this is she's not an elder, and this plays into one of the big parts of Underworld lore, is this stuff about genetic memory. So when you bite someone or you give someone your blood in that particular world, you can see pretty much everything they've seen, and this is like a very, very complex operation, which is why it can only be performed by another elder. So when she performs this act to wake Victor up, it's early 2000 special effects, but it looks pretty good the way the blood goes down. You can see his sort of desiccated organs, and they start coming back to life. It looks well cool, and you start getting these flashes of what's happened. But of course they're incomplete because she is I guess like a bit like Luke Skywalker, she's not a Jedi yet, so she's not fully aware. However, at this point now, the deed is done, and it can't be undone. Victor is now awake.
And he wasn't supposed to have been aroused for 100 years because, as you mentioned, there seems to be some sort of, like, I wouldn't call it shared duties. I would say agreement, like an agreement that was signed and dated probably, millennia ago, about where and when specific leaders would be active and not active. And so what she's done, while it did serve a purpose in her mind to get Victor to sort of take action and perhaps take her side, what it also has done is that it created a variable in the story that, perhaps, had it not been there, the outcome overall might have been dramatically different.
Correct. I mean, Marcus was supposed to be the one to be woken up, and this is why Victor is so confused when he finds out, well, why am I awake? What happened with Marcus? And then she's forced to explain, and she tries to tell him, look, this is going on, and I don't trust this. And you can see, and Bill Nye, he completely sells this scene. He says, look, I love you, but you've broken the law, and I can't, because it's trying to give the impression that the vampire society survives because of these laws that they have, which is very much from the Vampire the Masquerade game, which is why they're in trouble with those guys. But if you break the laws, you are putting everybody at risk. And he says to her, I can't do anything for you. You've broken the law, and there's going to be no leniency for you.
Correct. And interestingly enough, as Celine's actions have changed quite a bit and moved the chain of events in a different direction, Craven himself is also behind the scenes manipulating things and also moving the outcome in a different direction in regards to Amelia, this elder who is supposed to be coming to their, I guess, a home and becoming or joining part of their clan. It's a very, very important section of the story because it would be uniting two different clans together, which was part of the plan.
Yes, and she's there. She's now, her 100 years is up. She's there now to awaken Marcus, and she's going to go down into the vault, and Marcus is going to come out of the vault, and he's going to, unite the clans in this new epoch, because they're basically on the verge of winning this war as far as they're concerned. But of course, we find out then that Craven hasn't killed Lucian at all, and he's actually in cahoots with Lucian to have the elders offed. Peace will break out between the clans. Craven will be the guy that's delivered peace. The war will end, and they can go back to living their separate lives. So Lucian's end game is to stop the war, and he believes he can do this by getting hold of the last human son of Corvinus and turning him into the Uber werewolf, their super weapon, which is why they're after this young man who has no clue what's going on. He has no idea where his bloodline is from or anything like that, and they're all mad to get hold of him. And obviously Celine is drawn to him, and she wants to find out why they're after him. And then we kind of break into the second act, where she goes to find Michael, and all hell breaks loose.
Well, yes, and it turns out that in the story, the Lycans do have this sort of master plan, and the plan is something that Lucian has been, I guess, perhaps in the past 600 years, he's been locating every descendant of the family Corvinus and testing every one of these descendants to see if there's any way that he can manipulate their genetics to give him and the lichens an advantage over the vampires.
They're trying
And
to create a hybrid, aren't they? Is what
they're trying to
want
create
do.
a hybrid, and in the process, they've probably killed hundreds of descendants of Corvinus. But they feel that they have to do this because that was the bloodline that started it all. So it turns out that the Michael character in the beginning of the story happens to be a Corvinus descendant, and he's a doctor. And at some point, he he has another encounter with the lichens, and in this encounter, Michael finds himself getting bitten by Lucian, who who bites him, takes that blood sample, and of course we all know what it means when you get bitten by a werewolf.
Well, this is it. So that's a great sequence. So to dial it back a little bit to Michael being in the hospital, his mate, he's got a friend of his. Lucian's got that. He's literally got a mad scientist werewolf that he's got working for him. This like really creepy looking guy, and they've got this bloke tied up, and taking blood out of him, and they're mixing it up, and it's no good. And then Celine goes to the apartment, and Lucian's also on his way there with his crew, and there's Celine gets hold of Michael, pins him up against the wall like this, and says, "Why were they after you?" And he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And then the werewolves come in, and there's a firefight, and there's that really cool scene where the lichens are after Celine, and she shoots through the floor like it's like Snake Plissken in Escape from New York when he does it through the wall, but she does it on the floor, and like she falls down and falls down and falls down. It's just, it might well be style over substance, but it looks so damn cool. And of course, while she's fighting off the lichens, this is when Speedman goes into the lift. Michael goes into the lift. He's going down in the lift, and you just get this brilliant shot. The lift doors open. Sheen's there. He's looking down. He looks up and he goes, "Hello, Michael," and then bites him. And and the way his eyes turn and everything like that. And they've got this really cool effect with his mouth. I don't know if it's CGI or not, but his fangs look brilliant, and he gets him. And now, as you say, we now know what's going to happen to poor old Michael.
We certainly do. And now that Lucian has bitten Michael, and he actually has taken a blood sample from Michael, which he needed in order to see if he would be an appropriate subject for a hybrid, and he finds out he is, things become even more precarious for Michael. And of course, Celine takes him home to her house, this mansion, where essentially where all the vampires are. And she's protecting him, almost doting over him, as if this was her boyfriend practically. She's really looking after him, and it's obvious to everybody what's going on. Like she has a thing for this young man, and why shouldn't she? He's a good-looking guy, didn't really hurt anyone, and it's a kind of a mystery as to what the fascination is. But the other young lady in the coven approaches him.
Miles.
Yes. And she looks at him closely, like any young woman would. And she kind of finds out, indirectly. She wasn't trying to find out if there's anything wrong with him. She just wanted to look at him a little bit closer, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so she's shocked, completely shocked that
she sees that he's been bitten.
Yes, and not by a vampire. She knows that he's been bitten by a lichen.
Because before all that, before they get back to the coven, there's this great sequence where they're escaping, and I just wanted to touch on just one of the technical aspects of this movie. One of the effects, and it just looks so great, is when they jump into the car. Michael and Celine jump into the car to escape, and Lucian's after them. And you see him running along behind the car, and he catches up to the car, right?
Right.
Now, how they did that, and Michael Sheen actually did this stunt himself. They've got like a I guess some sort of carpet which they CGI'd out afterwards. So the carpet is sort of been dragged along, or the plank's been dragged along behind the car, so that it's not moving, but he's running along on it, and the effect just looks amazing because there's a practical effect of him running along this plank of wood. And of course he can catch up to the car because the plank isn't moving, but it looks like he's going like the Flash at this point. And of course then he jumps onto the car, she stops the car, and then they run him over. And then again there's this amazing effect where when you're caught up in the action of the film, you don't realize how brilliant this effect is. He hits the car, and you've got then they get a gymnast who's like spinning round, and then lands, and then it's a sort of a cut to Michael Sheen. So I love that sequence because of its practical nature. It just looks amazing. Because of course I think in those days CGI obviously was not as advanced as it is nowadays. So they had to do a lot of stuff in camera, and it always looks better in camera. But Celine, he's on the top of the car, and he's got this special glaive that he uses, like his hand thing, and he's stabbing it through, and he stabs her, and she's bleeding out quite badly. And obviously, Michael Corvin's a doctor, and he's going, look, you're in a bad way. She's like, no, I'm fine. Bang, and then she passes out, and the car goes into the river, right?
Right.
But the car that goes into the river is a miniature. It's a miniature effect, and it just looked like, I don't know how they did it. It looks like it's got so much depth and weight, and it sinks down, and then you've got the whole thing of that was a dry set, and they're just pouring water over the set, and the whole window is a CGI window. So the cracks that appear on the window are all CGI, but it looks 100% convincing. Anyway, that's my nerd special effects thing done. Sorry.
Well, yes, and in actuality, in that scene, in the car scene where unfortunately Celine has been injured by Lucien, and she's hanging on, but she's not fully 100% herself. Mm-hmm. And Michael himself is concerned about Celine, so he's observing her, and as a doctor, at least I got the impression he's either a doctor or a physician's assistant or something like that, a medical professional. He's observing her and saying, you're going to get us killed. You're not in a condition to drive. And she's like, I'm fine. And she passes out in that scene. And he actually saves her. I don't think she would have drowned, but, he does kind of save her. And she alludes to the fact that he saved her and looked after her. Mm. And so, I think she kind of said that to Craven as to why Michael was there. But that's truly not the reason why she brought him to, let's say the coven where the vampires are. She needs to find out.
There's two things going on, isn't there? She's yes. attracted to him.
Yes.
But that's the undertone. And the guys that wrote McBride and Griveau were quite categoric on this. They were saying it's a Romeo and Juliet story, but not in the terms of those two being the star-crossed lovers. They're attracted to each other, but there's no big kiss or anything like that between them. What they were saying was the Romeo and Juliet part of it is really the gangs, the Montagues and the Capulets. And Griveau, his slant on it, which I found really, really interesting, is he wanted to make a comment on interracial relationships and how you've got two people who like each other, but because of their different heritages are frowned on by both sides. And he actually came out and said that. I was listening to the commentary of it, and that was really the thrust of his message. And it's really quite subtle, but that was his intent when he was writing the first couple of drafts of that.
Yes, and it certainly does show that there is this connection between these two clans, but of course we don't quite know what that connection is exactly or entirely. Mm. And at some point when Michael's discovered to be a lichen, which is what most likely will happen to him at this point after being bitten by Lucien, immediately Celine, and correct me if I'm wrong, they flee. Yes. And, she has to take him out of there because none of the vampires would be sympathetic towards a lichen. And so now she's really in a tough situation here.
Because then you get the scene with Bill Nighy, Sophia Myles, and Shane Brolly, where Craven's kind of won at this point because he's saying to Victor, well, look, she's gone and she's taken the the Lycan with her, and now he's really got the upper hand as far as the relationship goes, because she's now proven herself to be a traitor, and she's infatuated with a Lycan. And Victor is all too ready to believe this, because, as we know, something similar happened to him in his past.
Exactly. And, at some point, Celine manages to consult the ancient books, which is considered forbidden,
Mm.
looking at the history, mainly because they're trying to hide what happened. But at some point, she discovers that she's almost been kept in the dark about what exactly happened, because she reads in one of the ancient books that Craven was awarded the role of leading the clan because he was able to produce proof that he had killed Lucian.
Yeah, he's cut the skin off his arm with the brand on it.
That's right. And while Corvin goes back to the hospital thinking that he's going to get aid from his friend, and shows him this injury, Celine pretty much knows that at this point, she's not safe anymore.
Right.
And ironically, it seems like everybody's angry with her except for one person, which I'm sure she doesn't truly understand why Lucian is not upset with her, because all of this is part of Lucian's plan. But another thing that I think is very interesting is that at the same time, it seems like the vampires have taken those UV rounds and created what they call sort of like a liquid silver nitrate round.
That's
That
right. They re-engineer this great idea to use it against their enemies.
Yes, and
Oh, but oh
so
my god, that scene where the Robbie G, the guy that plays the death dealer sort of mechanic guy, and
yes,
he's talking to Celine, and he says, "I'll try these silver nitrate," and they're doing the target practice, and they're not shooting at bits of paper with targets on them. They're statues, busts of Shakespeare. It's just like, why? But it just looks so cool. And she empties the clip into this bust of Shakespeare, and it just starts bleeding all of this silver stuff. It's just little bits like that I really enjoyed about this movie. The little bits of style over substance.
while it's true that they can fight with swords and anything else that comes their way, there is some sort of tech that they're trying to use. And they're also paying attention to bloodlines, as well as trying to figure out, playing this big game of who's going to be the ultimate winner and the one person left standing at the end. And so Michael finds himself sort of like banging on this I was going to say cemetery gates, on the vampires' gates, banging on there saying, "What have you guys done to me? Like, what's happening to me?" And clearly he's in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
And thank goodness he went there and opposed to somewhere else. Celine has no choice but to take him to sort of a safe house. And that's when I think that's the first time that Michael finds out what he may or may not look like, because inside of the safe house is an untransformed Lycan. Who?
Well, what happens here in this bit is she goes and here you get a little bit of an exposition dump as they're talking about their past, and she explains to him that it was Victor that, like the Lycans came and killed my whole family, but it was Victor that saved me, and he turned me into a vampire so I could carry on the fight against it. And then, of course, she's been to his apartment and she's seen pictures of his wife, and he's lost his family, and that's why he came to Budapest, because I think that's something that's not said in the movie. But Michael is actually the only American character in it. These vampires are all supposed to be from Eastern Europe, even though they've all got British accents. They're pretty much all supposed to be from that neck of the woods, which I really quite like. And then you get that bit where there's another attack, or just before the other attack, they have a moment, and he thinks he's going to get a kiss, because he's obviously infatuated because of Kate Beckinsale. Why wouldn't you be? And then she sort of handcuffs him to the chair and says, "You're going to change, and here's a gun. It's got silver nitrate in it. You've got to shoot yourself, and it'll arrest the change."
It's not handcuff and play. It's a handcuff and you're trapped.
Yeah, there was nothing naughty going on there. She's doing it for his own good.
Yes, but it was a kiss. I mean, I think that qualifies as a kiss. I mean, it was a legitimate, sweet moment between the two of them. But it wasn't going to go anywhere. But
Well,
I think
again, Aram, it was a kind of a 50-50. It's almost like she wants to kiss him, but it's
yes,
also a bit of a honey trap because she knows that he's going to want to kiss her, and she might want to kiss him, but also she has to complete the mission. And I really love this unsaid attraction between them, and it's never really fulfilled. And you can always write off everything she does as part of the mission, even though we know as the viewers that she's attracted to him. And I think it was smartly done. As I say, the film gets a bit of a kick in for being naff, but there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
well, certainly, and that is certainly a lot like real life. There are attractions, and you can't always act on everything like you'd like to. So there's a lot of unsaid, interactions,
Mm.
a lot of unfinished business out there. And they certainly do have on-screen chemistry as well. So you almost want them to be together. And I think that Michael also realizes, or after being bitten by Lucian, he's obtained knowledge through the bite.
Genetic memories, and this was like one of his concepts. Whether they got that from the game or not, I don't know. But this is very much part of what they knew. Technically, in terms of filmmaking, they knew that they couldn't keep doing lots and lots of flashbacks, and how would they explain these flashbacks and what was going on, and they hit upon this idea of genetic memory. So when obviously Kate leaves, or Celine leaves him there, and he gets captured by Lucian and then you have another bit of exposition between Lucian and Michael, where he says then this is where the turn in the film comes, because the lie that Celine believes is now revealed to be a lie, in that Lucian is not the villain of the piece at all. And there's this great speech by Lucian, or Michael Sheen, and the way he delivers this one line. So he explains that his race, the Lycans, were slaves, and they were there to guard their vampire overlords, and he just says it with like this sort of resigned sadness, and he said, I bore them no ill will. He was quite happy, doing his job and looking after them. And then he falls in love with Victor's biological daughter, who's due to be the next elder. And of course, because of their hidebound traditionalism, Victor for this cannot stand, as much as he loves his daughter, which is the payoff to what he says to Celine before. I can't show you, there's going to be no favoritism, this is the law, and he has to abide by the law. So he tortures Lucian in front of Sonia, the daughter, and then locks them in this room. And of course the dawn comes, and Lucian is forced to watch Sonia get burned alive, and of course this sends him crazy. And as the full moon rises and the vampires come in, he then turns into a Lycan, which the effects of which are absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
And this is all happening, in the past 500, 600 years ago, whatever it is. And he realizes he can't fight off all these superpowered vampires, and he makes a run for it. But there's a very important thing that happens here, is he grabs her necklace, this weird looking necklace that she's got, and that will become important like in future movies. But you find out here that Lucian didn't start this war, didn't want the war, but he had the temerity to, I think he says, to take one of them as my bride, and it's almost regret. Yes, why couldn't they just let us be? We were happy, it didn't have to be this way. And this was again, Griveau sort of says, if you look at the sort of the racial dynamics of it, if you like, Victor's the sort of plantation owner, and the vampires are the staff, and of course the Lycans are the slaves working for him and doing everything he says. And this is like a rebellion against the overlords.
It certainly is. And we do see that, and I think that that's a point where, along with the fact that Celine had gone into the ancient books, she realized that there was more to the story, with the information from Michael and the information from Craven. She finds out that Victor isn't exactly who he claims to be, and the story she was told isn't exactly accurate
Well,
at
that's
all.
revealed a little bit later. I think what she discovers in the law, in the law books, is that she doesn't trust Craven, and now she knows. She goes back and she looks at the history, and she realizes that Craven is lying, or she's virtually got proof, or she's now believes that he's a complete fraud, but she's got no proof at
Right,
this point.
right.
But then we come to the next bit where she does get her proof, right?
That's correct. And, sadly, we see a situation where Victor is now almost to a point of reinvigoration, that he can now leave the vampire's mansion. Whatever they did in order to create his sort of I was going to say salinated, desanguinated state, if you will, versus his fully sanguinated state, to what we see him, Bill Nighy, normally look like, was just fantastic. And now he's perhaps not 100% at his strength, but he's pretty darn close, and he's head and heels over everybody else's power. So he's coming to once and for all just really annihilate anyone who's in his way now.
Well, this is right. So you get this sequence where Selene is fighting a bunch of she fights off a bunch of Lycans, and one of them is the mad scientist guy, and she hasn't killed him. He's still alive, and you get that another scene with Sophia and Shane Brolly and Bill Nighy, and they're going, oh, this is terrible, what happened to Selene, and and then she appears with her prisoner and drags him in and goes, no, I've got the proof, and he's handcuffed to the floor, and then he starts talking, like. And he's got a wound on his shoulder, and she's got her hands in his wound. And she keeps squeezing it to make him talk, right? And what's really clever about that scene is he now does he's explaining about why they're after Michael Corvin, what's going on, and this is then where he says, talks about the Corvinus line, and and then Bill Nighy goes, one bitten by bat, one bitten by wolf. It's a silly fairy tale, so he doesn't, that's a nonsense as far as he's concerned. But the whole plot is then revealed, and it's found out that Craven hasn't been on their side at all. And of course, while all this is going on, then the camera sort of pans back, and they're all wrapped with this guy's story, and you kind of look around, and Craven's gone. he's legged it while they're telling the story, because he's like, crap. As soon as that guy appears, Craven knows that the game's up, and he disappears. And then, as far as Victor's concerned, you were right. He loves Selene. All is forgiven. I'm sorry for not trusting you. Let's go and kill the Lycans.
Two really important things. Victor alludes to the fact that he expects Selene to kill Michael Craven. And of course, we know that Selene is very conflicted with this, because she's actually fallen in love with Michael Craven at this point. So she can't kill this man, because what's happened to her is just what's happened in history, repeating itself, of a vampire falling in love with a Lycan. Now, the second part that is also happening at the same time is that Craven's master plan to eliminate Amelia, one of the elders, so that he can be put into power, he's executed this with the help of Lucien. But Craven truly is just a pawn in this game that he thinks he has the upper hand in. And
I think that Lucien was on the level at this point. I mean, they have a dialogue scene, don't they, where the nefarious plan is revealed, that the vampires arrive. Amelia and her coterie arrive in the train station, and the normal death dealers say, oh, okay, we're going to go. And Craven's like, no, my team's going to go. And the other guy's like, no. Oh, interestingly, the guy that's the head of those death dealers, not Robbie G, but the Caucasian guy, is actually Danny McBride. He's one of the writers, and he got himself in the movie. So you've got Grivo and Danny in the same movie.
Right.
So the train pulls in, and of course, they say, they flash their torchlights, and they're like, oh, they're on the train. Okay, it's all clear. And then the Lycans descend on the train, and they wipe out this particular elder. And as is revealed in the dialogue between Craven and Lucian, the plan always was to wipe out the elders. And I think I said earlier on, they get their peace, the war ends, and Craven gets to be the hero again, and he gets to be the elder. He gets to rule the vampires, and Lucian gets his revenge on Victor, and everyone goes their separate ways and everybody's happy. That was Lucian's plan. But of course, now that Selena's thrown a spanner in the works and Victor's awake, Craven's now proven to the as far as the vampire's concerned, crap, this guy's been double crossing us. Now Victor makes the decision he knows that Craven was behind the death of Amelia. Something's up. We know that there's a nest of lichens. We know that Lucian's still alive. Right, we are now going to go and wipe them out.
Right, and
but the thing about killing Michael doesn't come up yet.
Right, and I think that Craven may know, since he is, was deceptive towards everyone with his agreement with Lucian. He may be well aware that if Lucian does find this hybrid, and he knows all about it, Craven is not in the dark about it. Craven even knew that that Victor killed Celine's family.
That's right.
So he knew a lot of details, and he knows all of what's going on. But he also knows that if Celine somehow protects Michael, and Michael becomes this hybrid, that Michael will be the most powerful or one of the most powerful underworld creatures alive, and that Michael could overthrow him. And
this is right, because Craven's been around a long time. He's not a newbie vampire. He's older than even Celine herself, who's hundreds and hundreds of years old. And he obviously, when he's busted, he makes his escape, and of course he goes running to Lucian, and he then double crosses Lucian ultimately. But there's a great line from Lucian when he says, did you ever stop to think you might actually have to get your hands dirty? Like Lucian really just can't believe that this guy is such a coward and so inept and doesn't want to do anything. And then Craven shoots him in the back, right, with the silver nitrate.
Right.
And sort of leaves him for dead, at which point the death dealers arrive and all hell breaks loose, and they arrive with Victor at their head, and now Victor is back to full power, and you get all of these face-offs, and you get to see Ray's, which is Graveau's werewolf character. He comes across what he thinks is Lucian's dead body, and he's obviously mad, sad, and then mad, and he fights off one of the traitor vampires, the guy with the whips, which is such a cool scene.
That is a great scene, yeah.
And then he takes this guy out. But of course, that's a bit of foreshadowing, because then, Ray's is on full-on power, and Victor just comes striding through, and Ray's comes jumping out at him, and Victor is so powerful, he just grabs him round the head and breaks his neck with one hand, then he takes out his sword and stabs him. And this is showing you just how strong an elder vampire actually is. He's streets ahead of even the head werewolf's number 2.
And that explains why Craven was almost pushed into a position to have to do this deal with Lucian so that he could get power, because there was no other way that he could take over the coven. In fact, it might be several millennia before he would even be considered to be someone who might be put in a position of power, if ever.
He was always going to be number 2. He was never going to be, or number 4, actually. He was always going to be behind Amelia, Marcus, and Victor.
And speaking of Amelia, the reason why Lucian wanted his team to go and attack Amelia and her clan on the train was because he needed to get Amelia's blood, the blood of an elder.
Yes, yes, of course.
He takes a syringe, takes blood from her, and the intention is to inject it into Michael Corvin, who he manages to capture, and injects him with this. And he knows that Michael Corvin can handle this because he had tested his DNA and knows that Michael Corvin can become the true hybrid.
Wait, no, hang on. He doesn't. He injects himself. Lucian takes it and he injects himself with it to give himself a boost, because Michael at this point is about to turn into a lichen, while he's been captured.
Hmm.
That's but they need her blood, and of course team traitor vampire. That's why Craven sends them, because they just stand by and watch as their elders are wiped out by the Lycans, and the Lycans don't touch them either, because they all know that we're all on the same team here.
Right, right. And so after Corbin becomes this hybrid, it's at that point, let's say at the point where Corbin becomes an official hybrid,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I think it's Victor. It could be Victor. I don't know if it's Victor. Shoots Lucien with the silver nitrate bullet. Am I?
It's Craven shoots him and
Craven.
leaves him for dead. Yeah.
And Victor comes over, or someone comes over to Lucien, and Victor is kind of feels very superior to Lucien, thinking, "I finally got you. You're finally dead." And it's at that point that Lucien informs or kind of alludes Victor to the fact that not only has he created the hybrid, but that the girl, or this girl that he saved, this girl that he's replaced his daughter, is in love with this hybrid. And I think that was maybe like Victor's mental breaking point.
And Craven is literally being Craven. He's sort of skulking around, trying not to get caught by either side. And he captures or gets the jump on Celine. And he says to Celine, that Victor's been lying to her, and this is actually what really happened. It wasn't.
Yes.
It wasn't the Lycans that killed your family. It was Victor.
It was Victor.
He refused to drink the blood of animals. He every so often he'd go and drink the blood of humans, but it was he couldn't bear to kill you, who reminded him so much of his beloved Sonia. And then Lucien, who we think is dead, comes along and stabs him with his special, his hidden blade, and then Craven again runs away. And then you get, I think, the best scene in the movie is I think he's also shot Michael at this point. Now I'm struggling to remember, and I didn't.
No, well, there's a lot going on in these scenes.
But Michael's also badly injured,
right?
And Craven legs it. Michael's injured as well. He's been shot with the silver nitrate, and Lucien's dying. And he says to Kate Beckinsale, "Bite him."
Right, that's right.
When
that's right. I forgot that.
Yeah, and he's the one that tells her. But then,
and that's when.
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. That's when Victor finds her feeding on Corbin, and he just was like, "What?"
Bang! And he slaps her away, and he picks up Corbin and throws him through the wall there, and then he turns on Celine. And for me, the acting in this scene, because these two actors are they're brilliant at what they do. And she's saying to him, like, Craven told me you did that, and you did this, and you did the other, and he doesn't lie. He says, and the way he says it, he's, "I loved my daughter, and I love you, and I was forced to protect the line, as I am forced to do again." Because it's literally history's repeating itself, and off he turns around and off he goes, and then he has this fight. And of course, by this point now, Michael's now turned into the hybrid, and he looks really cool with all this. And they thought long and hard about this, and they said what they wanted to do. They didn't want him to look like a wolf, and they didn't want him to look like this or a bat. And they decided that even though it's completely out of left field, the aesthetic they went for was almost cat-like.
Yes.
So he's got the benefits of both. He's almost like a panther.
He did kind of look like that. Yes.
Yeah. And they have this huge fight, and it starts off where Michael's got the upper hand, but then, even though he's stronger, he's still a guy that's only 25, 30 years old or whatever he is. And of course, Victor is hundreds and hundreds of years old and was a warrior in his own right, and has been for 1,000 years. And he gets the jump on him, and he starts to win, and he gets him in a headlock.
Right.
And then what happens, Rrr
I believe that Kate,
Yes.
Kate's character Celine, grabs Victor's sword.
Yes.
And in sort of like what but it felt almost like Joan of Arc. I mean, I know it's not, but it felt like it. And she just kind of like slices his half of his cross sectionally across his face.
Yeah, and it's so cool because
And
like the sword is razor sharp, and he just, you think she's missed, and he turns
right,
round,
and
and
he's
he's, and he
hovering.
gets out his two knives, and then he sort of stops and blinks, and they just have his head just slides off.
Yes, and there's a quote that Lucien says to Victor before that final battle, the final boss battle. He says, quote, "You may have killed me, cousin, but my will is done regardless."
Yes, yes. Which is the cheesiest line, but the way he delivers it, it's just so good. They deliver this sort of Shakespeare-esque dialogue they just sell it so well. And that's kind of, what you get if you've got actors that are as good as these guys are. I say were, but are still. They're all still absolutely fantastic. And they deliver a gravitas to all of this silliness. And it again, to use Rob's word, or Richard Donner's word, it's the verisimilitude of that movie is never broken. It is taken with all seriousness. It's played completely straight all the way through, and because of that, for me, it's a bona fide classic. So we find then that Victor's dead and the werewolves are about to come, but Michael's the
Mhm.
hybrid, and they realize that these two are really, really strong and they don't want to fight anymore. And the werewolves disappear off into the background, and most of the death dealers have been killed at this point. They're on their own. Craven has yet again managed to escape, and you get the closing monologue of now, Celine says, now, I'm going to go from being the hunter to the hunted, and the film then ends with some hardcore early 2000s metal.
Yes, and we're kind of left with a scene where we see one last scene where we see the body of the scientist, the mad lichen
Yeah, the werewolf
scientist,
scientist. Yeah,
is inside the tomb where he's been slaughtered. Someone had killed him. I
Victor
don't
kills
remember.
him. Yeah, after
Victor,
he's been integrated, he just hits him and basically rips half his head off, and he's bleeding all over the floor, which we don't notice at the time, but at the end of the film turns out to be very important.
it's extremely important because the blood from this mad lichen scientist, seeps down into the tombs below, in the catacombs below on that floor, and drips into the other leader who was
Marcus.
supposed to have been revived. And we're left with an image of him now being reinvigorated, with great anticipation for the next film. From
Absolutely.
start to finish, there was so much action, so much of the story going on in here, and the flashback sequences felt like it was yesterday.
Mm.
The care that was put into everything, even just there were so many parts where there wasn't a lot of dialogue, and we saw a lot going on, and it was so easy to figure out, why this was happening and what the ultimate goal was. I think that Craven's flaw was that he didn't use that young lady, the one who kind of loved him,
Yeah.
to his advantage, and he needed her. In fact, he needed as much help as he could, because there wasn't really anybody who acted alone on this except for maybe Victor, but Victor, is an elder. So if we're looking at from the whole picture, everybody seemed to have a group of people who supported them so they
Yeah,
could
well,
get
they all
their.
had their own goals, didn't they? This is the great thing, because when Celine goes back and she's in trouble and she's taken away by the death dealers and she's locked into the room, Sophia Miles's character turns off the power. And she goes and opens the door and she throws Celine the gun, and Celine says to her, "Why are you helping me?" And she says, "I'm not helping you, I'm helping me," because she realizes with Celine out the way, she's going to have Craven all to herself, and she's going to be I don't know if she's party to his plans, but she knows that she can basically be a princess of the vampires or a queen if she gets with Craven, and that's clearly her end game.
Right. And I think that if he had worked, if he trusted her, I guess, more or less, because she seemed to want Craven to trust her.
Yes, she was in
And
love with him.
yes, but he didn't know how to use her properly. And I have a feeling that Craven kept a lot of secrets from everybody. And I guess maybe he felt that he could handle this. And if he knew the story, no one else would know all the details. He tried to keep things very quiet. But honestly, I think that that was his mistake. And, you know, he ended up in a situation where I think, you know, he hadn't thought about, well, what happens if things turn a different way? He hadn't anticipated that. So, and then of course we have to wonder what would have happened if Celine had never roused Victor.
Well, she would have lost. I mean, that was the key sort of turning point. You know, this was her big advantage was having Victor on her side. And you know, there's obviously the crisis point where he's not on her side, but ultimately when she captures the mad scientist, it's she's revealed to be right, and you think all is going to be well. And of course, it doesn't end up that way for poor old Victor.
No, it sure doesn't. I think he gets the shock of his life, and I do believe that he thought he had Celine, you know, under his thumb enough that she would always be faithful to him no matter what. And I think that what pushed her was her love for Michael. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't believe it was like, you know, whether she says, well, it's wrong that you're doing this to these people or anything like that. I don't think so. I
No.
think that she really found herself falling, you know, in love with Michael, and it must have been very similar situation. I mean, I would love, I'm sure we've already seen enough of Lucien's story, but you know, I think that it almost makes you wonder. It's like, well, you know, they fell in love as a forbidden, was it really a forbidden love? They're related, you know, technically speaking, you know, it's family.
Yeah, I think what I liked about one of the things I loved about it, when you look at it from any of the characters' perspectives, there's no real villain in it apart from Craven, and he's a pretty ineffectual, scheming villain. He's out for himself. But from Victor's perspective, in that speech that he gives, you know, Celine, he's not the bad guy. You know,
Right.
he's trying to protect his species against the Lycans. So everything he's doing, a bit like General Zod in Man of Steel, you know, everything he's doing is for the betterment of the vampires. He's not out to punish Celine particularly. He just knows that this is a job that he has to do, and she's the one that goes against the law. Because ultimately, if that film plays out and Victor kills Michael and Celine doesn't do anything, they've won the war. It's over. The lead vampire, the lead werewolf is Lycan is dead. So many Lycans have been killed, they'll be easy to hunt down. The vampires have the numerical advantage, they have the technological advantage, they've killed the scientists, that they've won the war. And it's by killing Victor that Celine makes, you know, makes herself the outcast. So if she had not done that, the war is over.
Right. And that is something else to think about. And I kind of regretted Lucien dying here. I didn't want him to die. And it's very funny how sympathetic and how I'm almost rooting for Lucien in this film.
Well, there's two things there. I mean, he is revealed to be the tragic hero of this. He's the one that lost his love. He's the one that perceives that he's been wronged for centuries. He's the one that's trying to protect his species from being wiped out. The vampires want to wipe, so he's a tragic hero. But you also, an actor of that caliber, you know, he is delivering, he embodies that character so well. You can't help but feel for the guy, because that's what great performances can do. You know, they get you emotionally involved with the character.
Yes, and I also wonder, you know, since the Celine character falls head over heels for Michael Corbin, you know, is this kind of like her first romance? You know, what's going on with her in regards to this, and are they allowed to have romances? Amelia was coming to the Coven mansion because they were going to awaken Marcus, and it was supposed to be a union of the clans, and everybody was very happy about that. And now that Amelia's gone, and now that Victor's gone, and Lucien is gone, Marcus has been, they're implying that Marcus has been aroused. I don't think he's going to be very happy to find out that Amelia is gone along with Victor in this particular case.
No, absolutely, and therein lies the events of the next movie. I think it's I forget what it's called now, the second one, but Underworld 2 essentially. But
Yes.
one of the things I wanted to say about this, it's a really sweet story that comes away from the movie itself, is that McBride, Wiseman, and Graveau wrote this together. You know, there were just three guys in a pokey little apartment somewhere in Los Angeles, and Wiseman was going to direct, the other two were going to write, and so on and so on. And they were offered each $700,000 to give the rights up for somebody else, and McBride and Graveau said, no, we don't want the money, we want Len to direct this movie.
Oh, wow.
And they could have, it's pretty much like Rocky, you know, they could have all made nearly $1 million out of it and gone their separate ways, but they had a pact. They'd agreed that this was what it was going to be, and three buddies, you know, got their film made. And one of the things that I heard in the commentary, which I thought was really interesting, was that film cost just over what the motorbike sequence in Matrix 2 cost. I think it was something like $23 million it cost to make the whole film, and it cost, you know, just as much as to make one sequence in one of the Matrix movies.
Wow, I had no idea. Wow, what
Yeah,
a,
they
a
did an amazing job.
difference. Yeah,
So, I guess we're coming to the end of this,
we
are
are
we?
coming to the end of this, but you know, overall, this was a newly created world that felt very real. It still feels real. It feels like it has been around for, you know, a millennia or two. It doesn't feel
Mm,
like it just existed yesterday. It feels like there's a long history, a lot of lore in it. We do see, you know, really, really powerful beings that are incredibly closely related from, you know, and in later films, we find out even more about that relationship. But when he calls Victor cousin, you know, I think that tells you right there that this is essentially is a family feud,
yes.
and that this particular situation that's happening between these two, this quest for power, we're maybe seeing for the first time in 600 years now a shift or a possible shift in one clan over another, or maybe not even that. Maybe the hybrids will be the ones who will you know, maybe they'll fall into a separate category. There's just so many options as to what can happen now. And
Mm,
Celine is in the middle of all of it.
yep. Absolutely. I mean, I love this film. I saw it in the cinema when it first came out, and as soon as it came out, I think it must have been video back in the day, or maybe DVD. I can't quite remember, but I got it, and then I got the special extended cut, which shows you a little bit more of the romance. I say romance between Sophia Myles and Shane Brolly, but it's more like Shane Brolly just using Sophia Myles. But you see a lot more of that stuff going on. But on the whole, I honestly think that it is it's a maligned for all the wrong reasons film. I think it's a bona fide classic. I think that it's one of those things that people on the interweb like to sneer at and pick holes in, but it speaks for itself that this franchise got 4 sequels. There are 5 Underworld movies. I think, you know, Joe Normal loves it. I think it's a classic, and I've got a lot of love for this film. And as I said, the aesthetic, the thought that they put into all of the design, the camera work, the desaturated look, the mood of the film, everything, and over and above everything else is the performances of those thespians. I think they're very theatrical in what they're doing, and they elevated what could have been, you know, a bit of a cheese fest into something. Like I say, I think it's a maligned classic, and I absolutely love it.
You're right. It could have gone all wrong had it been miscast, had, you know, the director not loved the story, you know, had there been a situation where even the supporting actors, there wasn't enough balance of in the story of the clans and the hierarchy, even to the point where, you know, the introduction or the reliance on a human line suddenly became important to, you know, the course of power in this story. I think that they thought about everything, and that tone, it's not sepia, but it I guess it would be like a blue sepia,
Mm.
that truly transfixes, you into feeling like this is maybe just really another level or dimension
Another
of
world, isn't it?
existence.
It's the underworld. It's not the world that we live in. As I say in the commentary, they do say one of the things Wiseman said that you won't see a 7-Eleven in this. You know nobody does
Yeah.
their washing in this. Nobody goes for lunch in this. This is not that. This is not that world. This is a hyper real world, and in some ways it reminds me. Now don't stop me. It reminds me a little bit of Star Wars, in the effect that Star Wars has the story of Luke doing all this stuff, but you're aware through the entire Star Wars story of Luke Skywalker and the Death Star and all that. There's a bigger galaxy out there. There's other things going on in the Star Wars universe, and I get the same vibe from Underworld in that yes, this is happening here now in Budapest or wherever it was. Yeah, I think it was. I think I'm sure it was Budapest. But you know that there's a whole world of these creatures going on. This is one event taking place in one city at one particular time, but this has been going on for 1,000 years all over the. You know what's happening in England? What happened in England during the Crusades? You know, what's happening there? What happened in Napoleonic France? You know, all of that stuff, and what's happening now in New York, 20 years after those events. What's happening now? The whole universe is there, and I hope that they get to explore it because there's been talk for years of a TV show, and I think in today's world with the advent of streaming and the desire for nostalgia and old properties having new life or new blood put into them, I think the time is ripe for a if not a reboot, certainly a loose sequel series.
Yeah, and it would be wonderful to see something like that. I think it would be perfect, and I think that it could go on for for 4 or 5 seasons. Whether if it decided to go even further back in time or further forward, it would certainly be interesting because this story is anything but boring.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Russ, for joining me for PGS Reviews.
Well,
This
thank you for inviting me.
spoiler. It's my pleasure to have you. This spoiler version of Underworld from 2003. And for everybody who's watching, please check out more of the PGS Review series. And remember, be kind.